Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today I wanted to talk about what I found to be some of the biggest and most exciting news for the game recently. That, of course, being the recent announcement of the rebirth of the ETF program for the Division 2 and its newest wave of recruits, the Foxtrot team. Now, in case you missed it, this was announced last week on a new agent briefing program that the devs will be hosting regularly over on Twitch. I will link my recap to that news in the upper corner in case you missed it or are otherwise interested in checking it out. Now, yes, the return of the ETF was announced during this briefing, and for anybody who is unaware, I will just quickly give some context here. The ETF, or Elite Task Force, is a program that Massive first put together in preparation for the 1.4 update of the Division 1. Now, historically, the program involved physically traveling to Massive Entertainment in Sweden in order to partake in multiple days of workshops in order to try out and get feedback on upcoming content. That was the case for ETF Alpha in 1.4, Bravo in 1.6, Charlie in 1.8, and Echo for the Division 2's TU6 update. Now, we know that this time around, physical travel won't be involved, yet they're still holding a new ETF phase. And what I really want to talk about in this video is, what does that mean? The ETF is historically only assembled for very big, very influential updates coming to the game. Is that the case this time around? Are they changing things up just to have them see more of a general plan for year 4 for those in attendance? This kind of mystery is really what I want to go over today. Give some of my own thoughts, hear all of yours. I suppose without further ado, let's get into it. So, Elite Task Force Foxtrot is coming. And the question I want to try and predict and answer for today is, why? We know two big changes that are happening from the usual format. A, like we just talked about, it's happening remotely instead of in person. Now, I don't think this is really worth speculating much on, because I think obviously the primary reason for this is the pandemic, and perhaps there have been budget changes since the last time they held an ETF. Who knows? I don't know who or what really pays for that whole program to usually go down, but in concept, they can hold the exact same kind of program and meeting virtually as they used to do in person. But the other big change is that they're now assembling both a PvE team as well as a PvP one. Now, I find this very interesting and frankly awesome. If you didn't know already, I'm a huge PvP fan in the Division, as you may have been able to tell by the background, and so I'm really glad that they're actually dedicating essentially half of the program to PvP. It was a hard choice for me when applying this time around as far as saying which group I wanted to enter into. I considered doing the PvPvE one because I do still play a lot of PvE, but I figured, you know what, I've always had the most consistent and most feedback on ideas about PvP improvement, so I might as well apply there. That was a bit of a tangent, but the point is, they're making that change, and I'm excited for it. It's unclear whether this means the two groups won't really be conjoined or if they'll interact much at all. You know, from past ETF phases when it was just one group, I remember members saying that the devs always made sure to get both PvE and PvP players for every single squad, but I guess now they're just doing two dedicated teams. And so here's the hang up for me that I mentioned earlier. In years past, the ETF was only ever called upon, that makes them sound so elite. The ETF has only ever been assembled in preparation for very major foundational updates for the game. 1.4 was Division 1's huge turning point. They took in all the feedback they had gotten in the first 6 months of the game and completely revamped the end game with world tiers, loot distribution, vendor stocks, etc. And so it was huge, and to this day pretty revolutionary in the Division's history. You know, maybe we'll have to talk about that one someday, but that was ETF Alpha's focus, and that was the update that started the ETF program in the first place. Then 1.6 was the game's first real PvP update, and honestly, to this day, it was one of, if not pretty much the only update that this franchise has ever had that's focused on PvP. Of course, it had some PvE additions, like the Stolen Signal Incursion and the addition of legendary missions, but Last Stand, the 8v8 mode, was the big selling point. DZ North was introduced, massively expanding the DZ's total area. They added in DZ leaderboards, new real-time events in there with contamination events. So all of that stuff was what ETF Bravo played and gave feedback on. 1.8 was a major update for the Division 1, the biggest post-launch update the game ever received. New open world area with Westside Piers, Rogue 2.0 got added to the DZ, Skirmish was added, Underground got reworked, lots of stuff, and so it made a lot of sense to get another ETF phase on that. That's what Charlie covered, and then it only ever happened once in the Division 2, and that was TU6 was where we saw the introduction of ETF Echo. Now, TU6 was kind of like year 1's big Band-Aid update. You know, there were a lot of pain points that players were experiencing, and the devs knew that. The problem was they were already working on Warlords of New York and TU8, which was going to drastically change the game, but back then in September, October of 2019, that expansion was still nearly half a year away. And so they knew they couldn't really just sit with things. So in TU6, they did stuff like introduce targeted loot. They reworked brand sets to allow them to drop for all 6 slots of every brand, which, yes, that used to not be a thing. Kind of crazy. I think that's when they initially changed and reworked a bunch of the gear sets. A lot of stuff. It was kind of the equivalent to the Division 1's 1.4. And as I said, that is is what ETF Echo was focused on. So now we come to the Division 2's year 4, where they're assembling ETF Foxtrot. And I think it's more than a valid question, hence why I'm doing this video, to wonder, what for? Is there an update coming that's so major that they want the full focus of an ETF group and their feedback to help guide it? Or, in the spirit of how communicative and freeform the development is these days in comparison to something like Division 2's first year where the plan leading to WONI was pretty set in stone, is the focus of the ETF now just shifting towards more overarching goals and communication and feedback? Let's talk about both options. Firstly, I think it is absolutely possible that the primary focus of ETF Foxtrot is to playtest and get feedback on TU17. We know it's roughly coming in December. That pretty much lines up with how early they had the ETF, test stuff back in those previous phases before those updates were released, and it's bringing another new game mode to the Division 2. And while we don't know what that will be yet, we've gotten more than a few teases from the devs that it and the overall Season 11 update is going to be pretty exciting. So maybe that's the case to such a degree that they want a full ETF group to get feedback on it while there's still time to change stuff around with it. Additionally, I would have to imagine that by the time the ETF assembles, they'll probably be playtesting the new specialization revamp, even if the devs aren't yet publicly committing to a release date for that. As we saw, just as recently as last week in the agent briefing, they still said it's TBD. I find it hard to believe that they're going to continue holding off on a feature that was originally slated for TU15. Obviously, it's not ready until it's ready, and that's fine, but I'd be a bit surprised if it was not coming alongside the new game mode in TU17. So the spec rework plus a new game mode, that certainly makes sense to me as far as ETF testing and feedback. On the other hand, there's then also the possibility that this new era of the ETF isn't always going to be focused on one singular update. I mean, they're making a dedicated PvP team. The spec rework and the new game mode aren't going to be PvP focused. They might include some elements of it, like we know with the spec rework, but even Daria did say on the agent briefing that the new game mode will be PvE, so there's that. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that this reborn Elite Task Force's new goal is just to advise and give feedback on general plans moving forward. The nature of title updates these days is a bit different than in years past, and in doing so, they all are working together a bit more, whereas I don't think that was always the case in the past. If something isn't up to par in one update, they'll usually now pick it up in the next one. Certain features or priorities are constantly shifting around as far as when they're going to come out, and I mean, we can even see this process happening now on the new known issues board. So instead of the ETF just focusing on one major update now, I could absolutely see it being more of a case where Massive just wants to convey to them some of their big PvE and PvP goals for the next, 3 updates, regardless of how far along they are on them or when they might come out, and just get feedback on how that sounds or feels or plays. And that might include the new game mode or the spec revamp, but in essence, that would be a new direction for the ETF program. But honestly, to me, is one that sounds like a good evolution for it for the stage of the game that we're at here in August of 2022, over 6 years into the Division franchise. But hey, either way they want to plan or approach this new era of the ETF for the Division 2, I'm sure that will have some level of positive outcome for the health of the game. I, for one, am excited to see that manifest itself down the line. People all have their own opinions on the ETF program, and that's fine, but in my eye, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, and TU6 were all great updates. Were they perfect? No, but compared to the likes of 1.3, 1.5, and TU8, they were much more well-rounded. And so, I hope this new era of the ETF can continue to strengthen the game's direction and keep it moving forward. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts about the newly announced ETF Foxtrot. What do you think about its return as a whole, the fact that they're now making both dedicated PvE and PvP teams, and which kind of path do you think they're heading down here? Is Foxtrot being assembled for a specific update? Might they be taking things in a more general direction moving forward? Whatever you all are thinking about that or anything else, let me know. As always, I'll be very curious to read through all of your thoughts. In case you are interested and have not already applied, you should apply for ETF Foxtrot ASAP. The team has announced that they're closing applications this Friday the 19th, and so I will leave an application link in the description below in case you want it. And yeah, that was fun to go over, everybody, so I hope you enjoyed. I find the ETF to be a very beneficial thing for the game, and I'm interested to see how they will play a role this time around now that we're into year 4 of the Division 2. That's going to do it for me today, though, everybody. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold. Ow.